was it. We had to land on that runway. One time, that's all we had.
On the morning of July 19, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232, a regularly scheduled DC-10 service between Denver's Stapleton International Airport and Chicago, took off. What no one knew was that there was a flaw in the number 2 tail-mounted engine that would lead to the tragic crash of United Airlines Flight 232 in Sioux City, Iowa. However, this crash was also considered by many to be a triumph. New safety concerns would be raised that would save the lives of hundreds of people to come. The aircraft being used on today's flight was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10. The DC-10 acquired somewhat of a bad reputation from a series of unfortunate and almost completely fatal crashes around the world, but also in the United States, such as this crash.
Right, American 191 Heavy, you want to come back into what runway? He's not talking to me. Yeah, he's going to lose a wing. There he goes. There he goes.
In command of today's flight was Captain Alfred C. Haynes, a 33-year-old veteran of United Airlines. He had accumulated over 30,000 hours of total flight time, 7,000 of which being in the DC-10. Assisting Captain Haynes on today's flight was First Officer William Records, a former National Airlines and Pan American World Airways pilot. He had accumulated over 20,000 hours of total flight time, and almost 700 of which were in the DC-10. Also assisting Captain Haynes today was Second Officer Dudley Dvorak. He had been with United Airlines for only 3 years, but had 15,000 hours of total flight time. Also on board today's aircraft was Captain Dennis Fitch, an instructor pilot who worked for United Airlines in the Denver, Colorado Training Center. Some 10 miles north of Alta, Iowa, when United 232 was completing its rollout turn to point toward Chicago, a loud bang was heard in the cabin. Immediately, Captain Haynes realized that he needed to shut down the number 2 engine, but that was not all. There was something worse. And they all knew it when William Records stated, "Al, she's not responding." One of the 17-year-old intake fan blades of the number 2 tail-mounted engine had a 13mm hairline crack. When the fan blade was built, there was a high concentration of nitrogen in the area. This created a cavity. This cavity widened into a crack every time the engine started up and started spinning at 3,800 rotations per minute. And on July 19th, 1989, the stresses were too great. The fan blade flew apart, cutting all 3 hydraulic systems lines in the tail. The pilots had absolutely no control over any of the control surfaces. This includes pitch, roll, and yaw. In layman's terms, this is like driving a car downhill with no brakes and no steering. By alternating left and right thrust on their 2 remaining engines, the crew found that they were able to steer the airplane. However, there was a 20 to 40 second lag time. Also, the crew invited that Captain Dennis Fitch from the back come up to the cockpit and help out. He knelt right behind the throttle quadrant and manipulated the throttles for the rest of the flight. Sioux City Gateway Airport was chosen for the emergency landing of United 232. However, it was not easy getting there. Although the aircraft was only 60 miles away, it still took United 232 over 40 minutes to get lined up to the runway. United 232 was now on its final approach into Sioux City. However, instead of the normal 150 knot approach speed, United 232 was traveling over 215 knots. And also, United 232 was lined up with the shortest runway at Sioux City Gateway Airport. This runway was built in World War II and could not withstand the weight of the massive DC-10. As soon as the massive DC-10 touched down on the runway, the right landing gear smashed all the way through the concrete, causing the airplane to cartwheel and slide across the entire airport.
So the instant that it started to cartwheel and was going to crash, we knew it in the emergency room. And the helicopter landed. They were able to find some of the most severely injured people that were still alive. And actually, it turned out that it was within 15 minutes of the time the plane hit the ground, we had our first patient in the emergency room.
296 people were on board the aircraft. 111 died, and 185 people survived.
But there were a lot of head injuries. A lot of people were unconscious. A lot of people were having trouble breathing because they had chest injuries, broken ribs and things of that, broken necks. A lot of leg injuries, internal injuries.
Rescuers, who included Iowa Air National Guardsmen and firefighters, fought to save as many people possible. This included men, women, and children.
I think one of the things that was best for the nation and for the industry were some of the lessons that were learned. Some of the lessons that people learned about handling the airplanes. The lesson they learned about the way the hydraulics were set up on that DC-10 that allowed something so unforeseen to be so catastrophic. And they redid the hydraulics on all the DC-10s after that because of it. The lessons in handling disasters that have been utilized across the country by disaster preparedness organizations. I know the head of the disaster organization plan in Sioux City spent a lot of time over the next 2 years speaking to disaster organizations in other communities, telling them and teaching them about what went well, what they did, why things worked. And so there was a lot of education that came out of it. And one of the other good things that came out of it was saving as many lives as were saved.
Although it was a tragedy for those who died on the aircraft, it was also a triumph for new safety measures that were brought into place due to the crash. New aircraft have been fitted with hydraulic fuses. They isolate punctures in a hydraulic line and cut off the leak. The crash led to better fatigue stress crack testing on all jet engines. Certification design and maintenance philosophies for turbine engines were revised. Complete hydraulic failure is now included in all pilot training. In February of 2001, United Airlines retired their last DC-10 from service, and the Sioux City crash marks the only United DC-10 crash in their 20 years of service with the airline.